At precisely 10:47 this morning, the United States watched a moment where a former president stood just one sentence away from a jail cell. This wasn't symbolic or hypothetical. It was literal. Inside that courtroom, events unfolded that legal experts are already calling one of the most direct confrontations with judicial authority in modern American history. And it's critical you understand this. Every second of it was preserved on the record, on camera, and in real time. A federal judge fixed his eyes on Donald Trump and issued a blunt command: sit down or go to jail. Trump did not comply. What came next was a 12-minute standoff that pushed courtroom security to advance, compelled attorneys to physically step in, and left the entire American legal system frozen in a moment of uncertainty. Over the past several hours, I've reviewed court transcripts, legal breakdowns, and firsthand accounts from those inside the room. I'm going to explain exactly what unfolded because in this case, the details matter far more than the headlines. But to fully grasp what happened, you first need to understand the atmosphere that led to this confrontation. For weeks, seasoned legal observers had been noticing warning signs. These weren't official filings or formal motions. They were patterns, subtle shifts that experienced court watchers recognize immediately. Trump has clashed with judges before. That's nothing new. However, those confrontations have always followed a predictable rhythm, almost like a script he knew by heart, showing up late to draw media attention, muttering comments just loud enough for others to hear, posting inflammatory statements during lunch recesses, exiting the building with defiant sound bites prepared for the cameras waiting outside. That had become the routine. That was what everyone was prepared for. Then, yesterday, that routine collapsed. Analysts who closely track Trump's courtroom behavior began noticing red flags, late-night truth social posts filled with anger, a last-minute reshuffle within his legal team, extra security personnel arriving earlier than usual, and perhaps most concerning of all, his attorneys suddenly going quiet. There's a lesson I've learned from covering these cases. When Donald Trump goes silent ahead of a court appearance, it usually means something is about to erupt. By early morning, courthouse security was already reporting what they called an unusual level of tension inside the defense team's staging area, emergency strategy meetings that hadn't been held in weeks. The kind of frantic last-second huddles Trump's lawyers only call when they're bracing for something volatile, a damaging witness, an unexpected ruling, or a client on the verge of going completely off script. No one could tell which scenario was about to unfold. Some speculated that all three might be colliding at once. What court observers did notice, however, was a shift in Trump's demeanor. In federal court, even the smallest change in a defendant's posture doesn't go unnoticed. Experienced judges pick up on it immediately. Judge Engoron was watching. Now let's step inside the courtroom. Trump sat at the defense table in his familiar Navy suit. The prosecution was questioning a key financial witness. Everything seemed routine, standard procedure. Then it happened. Trump didn't whisper an objection to his lawyer. He didn't scribble a note or nudge his team. He spoke out loud, sharp, direct, targeted straight at the witness. That's a complete lie, Trump declared. A total fabrication. Everyone in this room knows it. The courtroom froze. Picture the scene. Pens paused mid-scribble, spectators holding their breath, and camera operators in the overflow room leaning forward to capture every second. Judge Engoron slowly removed his reading glasses and looked up. The warning he delivered wasn't routine, procedural, or diplomatic. Legal analysts reviewing the transcript described it as swift, unmistakable, and fully backed by the authority of federal contempt powers. Mr. Trump, the judge said, his voice cutting through the silence, you will not speak unless addressed. You will not interrupt these proceedings. Is that understood? Then the story took an unexpected turn. Trump refused to relent. Seconds after the warning, he leaned back in his chair and said loud enough for the court reporter to capture, "This whole thing is a joke, a complete joke." Let's be clear about what had just happened. A defendant in a federal trial openly mocked a sitting judge on the record immediately after a direct warning. These weren't the words of someone seeking leniency. They were the words of a man testing whether anyone in the room had the authority to stop him. Judge Engoron did have that authority, and he exercised it. Court transcripts confirm that the judge issued not one, not two, but three escalating warnings within 4 minutes. The first came after Trump interrupted testimony. The second followed an audible scoff and a muttered "kangaroo court" directed at the prosecutor. The third warning came when Trump physically stood from his chair. "Mr. Trump, sit down immediately," the judge commanded. "Sit down now, or I will have you removed from this courtroom and held in a detention cell for the remainder of today's proceedings." That single word, detention, hit like a thunderclap. Consider what just unfolded. A federal judge, in the midst of an active trial, had just told a former president of the United States that he would be sent to a jail cell if he refused to comply. This was no longer a warning. It was a direct, legally binding order with immediate consequences. Trump's lead attorney, Alina Habba, quickly rose and requested an emergency sidebar. The judge allowed it. For 12 minutes, 12 excruciating minutes, lawyers huddled at the bench, speaking in urgent whispers. Meanwhile, Trump remained standing at the defense table, arms crossed, jaw tight, refusing to sit. When the sidebar ended, Habba returned to the defense table and leaned toward Trump's ear. Witnesses in the gallery reported she spoke rapidly, her tone urgent. Trump shook his head. She tried again, more insistently this time. He looked away. Finally, this detail is critical, she placed a firm hand on his shoulder and said something that caused him to slowly, reluctantly lower himself back into his chair. This is what matters. Trump's own legal team had to physically intervene to prevent their client from being taken to a holding cell in the middle of his own fraud trial. Now let's examine why Judge Engoron's response carries such weight. This wasn't just about maintaining courtroom decorum. It was about something far bigger. Trump's conduct wasn't merely disrespectful. It threatened to destabilize the judicial process itself. Judge Engoron, fully aware of this, responded with maximum authority, not emotionally, not vindictively, but judicially. He made no empty threats, no hesitation. He cited specific contempt statutes. He referenced established incarceration precedents. That level of precision matters enormously. Former federal prosecutors, speaking under anonymity, described Trump's behavior as calculated provocation, an apparent attempt to create grounds for a mistrial or appeal. And yet today, Judge Engoron demonstrated that he is both patient and prepared. His responses were not just legally correct. They were firm, measured, and unshakably authoritative. The warnings were delivered with such precision that there was absolutely no room for misinterpretation and, critically, no room for appeal. That level of exactness tells us something vital. This judge anticipated this very scenario. Judge Engoron isn't sitting back passively. He's actively managing a defendant who seems to believe the rules don't apply to him. Here's what most people reading the headlines will miss. Commanding a federal judge's attention isn't easy. Today, Trump managed it and immediately felt the consequences. For decades, Trump has operated under a simple assumption that he can intimidate, outlast, or overpower any opposition. That courtrooms, like boardrooms, eventually give way to pressure. Federal judges, however, do not. They hold lifetime appointments. They are insulated from political influence, and they wield something Trump has rarely encountered in his life: real enforceable authority. Judge Engoron's warning is now permanently recorded in the official court transcript. It wasn't meant to embarrass Trump. It was meant to send an unmistakable signal. Obstruction, intimidation, or theatrical disruption will not be tolerated in this courtroom. The judge made it clear that Trump's conduct violated the basic standards of courtroom decorum. Put simply, you are not above the rules. You follow the same rules as everyone else or face the same consequences as everyone else. You rarely hear that tone from a sitting federal judge unless something genuinely serious is at stake. Here's what most coverage is overlooking. This was far from an isolated incident. This wasn't simply a defendant losing his composure. Let me walk you through the full picture of what unfolded in a single 6-hour window. During the morning session, Trump interrupted sworn testimony and ignored direct judicial commands. By lunch, he posted multiple attacks on the judge via Truth Social. His legal team filed motions formally questioning the judge's impartiality. Outside the courthouse, he told reporters that the entire trial was a disgrace to everything America stands for, all of it happening within the same 6 hours. When Trump moves multiple pieces across multiple fronts simultaneously, it signals something far bigger is being orchestrated. Legal analysts are now considering several alarming possibilities. 1, Trump is deliberately laying the groundwork to boycott future court proceedings entirely. 2, he is systematically attempting to provoke a mistrial through sustained disruption. 3, and this is the scenario causing the most concern, he may be attempting to manufacture a constitutional crisis by openly defying a direct court order. Some context helps explain why he is acting this way. Trump is under unprecedented legal pressure. His attorneys want him silent, avoiding additional contempt charges. His political advisors want him to appear strong and defiant. Campaign donors want him to seem persecuted and sympathetic. His electoral base wants him to fight visibly and loudly. He is trying to balance all of these competing demands while facing multiple criminal indictments across different jurisdictions. When defendants in that position make sudden, dramatic moves, they are rarely acting from strength. They are acting under pressure. They are acting out of desperation. They are acting from vulnerability. Today, Judge Engoron removed one of those options from Trump's playbook. He didn't issue vague warnings. He didn't defer difficult decisions. He didn't seek counsel's input before acting. He made a direct, unmistakable threat: follow the courtroom rules or go straight to jail. Let's step back and consider why this matters beyond the courtroom drama. What we're witnessing is a fundamental test of judicial accountability, a stress test of the American rule of law. Trump wants to see whether he can bend the system to his will. Judge Engoron wants to prove that the system still stands firm. Prosecutors aim to prevent proceedings from descending into chaos. And the American public on every side of the political spectrum is watching closely to see whether justice truly applies equally without exception. Trump once believed he could delay this trial indefinitely. He believed he could intimidate witnesses into changing their testimony. He believed he could leverage media attention to pressure the court into favorable rulings. He believed he was untouchable. Tonight, the exact opposite is happening. The trial is moving forward on schedule. Witnesses are testifying under oath without hesitation, and the presiding judge is holding him accountable in real time, on camera, and on the record. Outside the courthouse, the lead prosecutor addressed the media briefly. She made it clear the case will proceed exactly as scheduled. No individual is above the law. And the court has made abundantly clear that further disruptions will carry serious consequences. These weren't rhetorical flourishes for headlines. They were formal statements from a prosecution team fully aware of just how high the stakes have become. So what comes next? As the trial unfolds over the coming days and weeks, more details will emerge about what Trump intended with today's outburst. But one thing is already certain: Judge Engoron's response was entirely appropriate. It preserved essential courtroom order, protected the integrity of the trial, and reinforced the constitutional authority of the federal bench. What happens next depends entirely on Trump's actions. If he follows the court's directives, this moment will be remembered as a turning point for accountability. If he defies the court again, Judge Engoron has already shown he is fully prepared to act. Real consequences are on the table, and he has made it clear that those consequences include incarceration. Tonight, reports suggest Trump's legal team is visibly scrambling. Mar-a-Lago is unusually quiet, too quiet. And when Trump goes silent after a confrontation like this, it usually signals one thing: he is recalculating, weighing his next move. Because today, Trump was confronted with a truth he has resisted his entire life. Federal judges hold real power. Courts wield binding authority, and no one, not even a former president, stands above the law. Here are 3 key takeaways from today's events. First, a federal judge issued a direct, legally binding threat to incarcerate a former president. This was not symbolic, not procedural. It was a clear, on-the-record message: obey the rules of this court or go to a cell. Second, Trump's own legal team had to physically intervene to prevent him from being removed from the courtroom. That alone tells you how close we came to an unprecedented moment in American legal history. Third, this wasn't accidental. Trump's behavior appears to be part of a calculated strategy, testing judicial limits, creating grounds for appeal, or setting the stage for something even larger. But today, the court pushed back harder than he anticipated. The courtroom held. The judge stood firm. And for the first time in this legal saga, Donald Trump appears genuinely uncertain about what comes next. This story is far from over, and I'll be covering every development as the next chapter unfolds. If this breakdown helped you understand what actually happened today, not just the headlines, but the legal mechanics and their real-world significance, consider subscribing. I do this kind of deep analysis regularly. And in the comments, I want to hear from you. Do you think Trump will comply going forward, or are we heading toward an even bigger confrontation? I'll see you in the next one.